they didn't all keep it clean. That's for sure.
One of them definitely did.
One of them definitely did.
Not all of them took good care of their feet either.
Oh boy.
Oh, can you cut that out of the episode,
God.
please?
Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the 35th episode of Good Timin. As always on this podcast, we're going to be talking all about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And today we're going to be discussing the band's fifth studio album and their first of 1964, Shutdown Volume 2. So, as always with our album shows, we're first going to go over the album's history and background and talk about how the album came together. And then we'll discuss the individual tracks one by one and share our thoughts and opinions on each of them. Also, at the very end of the show, we'll also go over a couple of additional Beach Boys and Brian Wilson related recordings from around the time of the album's release, and we'll share our thoughts on those as well. So, joining me today, we have our usual Beach Boys buds, Riley and Matt. So, as always, I'm glad to have you guys here, and I can't wait to discuss both the highs and the lows of this album. So, before we get into the album's history, do you guys have any general thoughts or opinions on Shutdown Volume 2 that you wanted to share?
This album has the highest highs mixed with the lowest freaking lows. By far, probably the most inconsistent album of their early work. It's incredible. But when it's good, it's damn good. When it's bad, you just want to take it off the platter and smash it.
Matt, that's what I was gonna say. It's the highest highs of their career and their lowest, maybe not their lowest lows, but definitely some lows. Because unfortunately, the Beach Boys have some low fucking lows. But I will say in a re-listen, there's 7 tracks. I range from I like it a lot to I absolutely adore it to yeah, it exists. And I was like, maybe this album's better than I thought it was. And then I listened to it. I'm like, all right, this is going good. And I get to the latter half, and it's just.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. It's I was gonna say this is the Beatles' White Album of their catalog, but I would argue the Beatles' White Album is actually the Shutdown Volume 2 of their catalog because this one came first. So the Beach Boys did beat them to this.
Yeah, so this album, like you guys said, some really high highs and some really low lows on here. For me, the best songs on here are some of the best in the band's entire catalog. And I think they're on par with the highlights of some of the albums that followed, like All Summer Long. I also think that the highlights on here really show Brian's continued development as a songwriter and producer, as well as Mike's development as a lyricist. I look at a song like The Warmth of the Sun, and I think that's like a really good example of a song that really shows them both maturing together as songwriters. But again, along with those positives, there's also quite a bit of filler on this record, particularly on side 2. And I think that really holds back this album from being considered a classic Beach Boys record. So I don't think it's like a horrible record by any means, but like you guys said, it's definitely one of the most inconsistent in the band's entire catalog. And because of all the filler on there, it's not one I would recommend to a new fan for sure. I definitely say to stick to if you're gonna listen to an early album, check out something like All Summer Long or even Surfer Girl compared to this, because this one, it's just very patchy. So. All right. So to kick us off, Riley, do you want to go into some of the history behind Shutdown Volume 2 and then also explain why the record is called Shutdown Volume 2 for our listeners who may not know?
So we were late 63. By the end of that year, Marks completely dipped. So you have the iconic classic lineup of Al Jardine, Brian Wilson, Carl Wilson, Dennis Wilson, and Mike Love. And they're still being managed by Brian's dad, Murray, although I'm kind of a little lost with some of the dates because some say that he was booted as their manager during the sessions of Fun, 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 but then there's also stuff that other people have said where it's a little later. But I might as well get out of the way. Murray was kind of a prick. It is said that in the actual recording studio, he had his own little private monitor, something that he'd mess around with that had no relation to the actual
Yeah.
music, which I thought was funny because he would just be basically like giving a kid a toy, like give him something to do, which I thought was pretty funny. And you always hear him like chiming in like, "Oh, it's not enough trouble." He's just a douchebag. So they kind of come at heads eventually, and Brian boots him as the actual manager, but he still sticks around the studios. He still is a douchebag in the studio, but he has no actual power. He's just kind of there. And he's also left with the publishing rights in the company Sea of Tunes, which is their publishing company for their music. We'll get back to that topic eventually, because it does play an important role down the line. Um, anyways, besides that, Capitol still riding in on the success of the Car songs, not just from the Beach Boys, but from all the spinoff groups. You have like the Ripcords, the Hondells, lots of in-studio groups that are just like studio musicians, just to release music and make some money. Um, it's weird because in June of 1963, they released a compilation called Shutdown, named after the Beach Boys song. So in 1964, when the Beach Boys are still riding in on the success of the Car songs, and they're kind of sticking with that theme, they want to release an album called Shutdown. Lo and behold, they can't. So what do? They name it Shutdown Volume 2. Very creative there, which I've always thought is pretty funny because they usually name it after the first song on the album. I'm kind of surprised they didn't just go with Fun, Fun, Fun. That being said, in the mid to late 70s, when the Beach Boys kind of come back for commercial success, the re-release of the album was called Fun, 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 which is honestly kind of stupid. Just call it Shutdown Volume 2, but it's whatever. Brian's side projects are kind of slowing down, and this is you kind of start to notice the first wears of Brian as an actual like producer, songwriter in here, because now that David left, Brian has to go back into the touring, which is heavily impacts him. He's not really allowed to do his side projects as much as he was. And you start to notice the wear and tear on Brian early 64. And the most important thing I would say that happens in 64 happens in February when the Beatles land in New York and they go on the Ed Sullivan Show. Just the Beach Boys heard about that when they were in Australia doing like a small time like radio program, like promo. Here they are like in the fucking slums. And then you have these four lads from Liverpool going on the Ed Sullivan Show, and instantly hitting success. Said, I think like 64 million people tuned in. I don't know if that's the actual number, something like that.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
But, I mean, my grandmother tuned in, and I remember her. She told me about it, how she tuned in. She saw the Beatles. My uncle tuned in. My great uncle tuned in. So it was massive. They had instant success.
You also have to keep in mind that there were only 3 TV channels at the time. So yeah, to watch, and this was like the hot new group. So
but still, absolutely wrecks any progress the Beach Boys were working towards, because they were the #1 band around that time. But then the Beatles come in, and they're kind of delegated to #2, and you kind of start to notice a pattern of them always being in quote unquote second place with them.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about the Beatles too much because Lord knows we have talked about the Beatles a fuck ton. More than we should on a Beach Boys podcast, but it's whatever. So, anyways, March 1964, Beach Boys released Shut Down Volume 2 with quite a good single, Fun, Fun, Fun. So
yeah. So, all right. So with that, do you want to get into the track by track rundown, since that's the opening track on this album?
Speaking of Fun, 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 that's the opening track. It starts off with the Chuck Berry riff.
Yeah.
I don't care though. I think it's an iconic riff. I know it from Johnny B. Good and Fun, Fun, Fun. And to be honest, I don't really give a shit if it uses it, because Chuck Berry used that riff about on every single song he did. It was the original producer tag.
Yeah, it also came
like yo, Pierre, you want to come out here? Except so it doesn't matter. I think it's quite a way to open off an album. It's very energetic. Yeah. And unlike Chuck Berry, there is some musical complexity to this. I don't think even I can talk about it. I'm sure Nate could. He'd be a good person to get a little thing from. But there's some like complex chord changes happening here, especially in the chorus, and she'll have fun, fun, fun under the vocal harmonies. And this is quite a song. It's seems basic at first, like classic rock and roll, but you kind of forget that the vocal harmonies are stacked on top, and they're beautiful. And this has become a concert staple for the band. I've kind of grown to really like the Nebworth version from 1980. A little bit more than this one because it's super heavy, but this is an iconic song. And Brian's falsetto at the end is godlike. He is hitting insane notes. So I think it's a great track. Obviously, I don't know if I'd give it a 10 out of 10, but it's an incredible track. It was one of my most played tracks last year. It brings the energy, has great guitar from Carl. Just a great song, and cheeky lyrics from Mike. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a classic. Going back to Chuck Berry for a minute, that riff itself came from a Louis Jordan song, so it wasn't like he even invented the riff.
So it wasn't his Pierre, you want to come out here?
The riff was had been tossed around a lot. But yeah, it's a classic song. Like you said, it's a lot more complex than meets the eye. It sounds pretty simple, but when you really dig into it, I'm certainly not an expert on chords or anything like that. But even I can tell that it's pretty complex. I will say though, a couple things I want to say about it. Mike gives a great vocal. Obviously, Brian's great on it. All that. I want to say it's just a couple. One thing is it's very lame how they kind of like. I'm sure we've all seen it, that Summer Dreams movie from 1990, where it's like they're like apparently writing the song, and Dennis like goes with a girl in her Thunderbird, and Mike's like, they're, they're gonna have fun in that T-bird till her daddy takes it away. It's like the most corniest piece of dialogue I've seen. And I know it was like a 90s TV movie, so it had like no budget to begin with, but that was just so freaking corny. Anyway, it's still a really good song. A classic. I had to just put that out there because that is just you all need to go look that up if you haven't seen it.
I found her cold open.
But anyway, no, it seriously is a really great song. It's a classic. There's a reason that it's become a staple of oldies radio. I used to hear it when I would go to the Christmas tree shops, which are no longer with us, rest in peace. But when I used to go there, I used to hear it on the radio all the time over there and over the PA system, and it's a classic. It's a classic.
Yeah, pretty much everything that you guys said. It's a classic song. Another one of those songs that really defines the group for a lot of people. I know it's like used as their concert closer for many years now. Great vocals and lyrics from Mike. As a race fan, I especially like the line, "She makes the Indy 500 look like a Roman chariot race now." I think that's a creative little line there. I also really love the group harmonies on this. Carl's guitar playing is great. And then, of course, like Riley mentioned, Brian's falsetto part at the end is incredible as well. I do wish that falsetto part went on a little bit longer in the studio version. I know like when they do it live, they really stretch that out. Like on the Nebworth version, that goes on for like a minute and a half. And I'm also with Riley. As much as I do like the studio version, I do find myself coming back to the live versions of this song more, specifically the in concert version from '73. And then the Nebworth version, just because like Riley said, the guitar on that is so heavy and like there's just so much energy to it. So yeah, but that said, I do still like the studio version, and I think it's a really great way to open the album. So Phone Energetic Shutdown Volume 2.
All right.
All right, track 2.
Track 2 is Don't Worry Baby. This is one of the Roger Christian co-writes, this is the most famous Roger Christian co-write. It was supposed to be Brian's sequel to Don't Worry Baby, so much so that he actually offered it to Phil Spector to do for the Ronettes. And of course, Phil Spector refused. He sure as hell missed, because this is one of the iconic tracks, not just from this album, but just from the Beach Boys' career. It's considered one of Brian's best songs, period, and I tend to agree. I know there is like the little similarity to Be My Baby, but I still find it a completely different track. The chord progressions are completely different. They are similar, but they are different, and there's people out there that always say that it's like a ripoff, and I just think that's fucking bullshit. It was pretty much, it was so literally intended for the Ronettes, and they didn't take it. So of course Brian's gonna take it, and I think it's a genius fucking move. It's the B-side to one of my favorite singles of all time, I Get Around, Don't Worry Baby. But the track is just gorgeous. Great production. You could see him amping up with the Spector influence, but I kind of see him taking a little bit of a step further. I love the vocal harmonies on this one. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. Some of the best harmonies, period, from the group. I don't know. It's just one of Brian's best ballads. I think Christian gives great lyrics, because even though this is technically a car song, for the longest time, I didn't even realize it was a car song.
Yeah.
Just because like how good the track is in terms of quality. And it wasn't until I took a deeper look at the lyrics, and I think the lyrics are really cool, actually. It's about like a little race, like a little drag race happening. And I guess like just the whole general theme of the song, even though it's a car song, it's not really about cars, which I think is really cool. It could still be played for any kind of audience. It's just an all-time classic. One of Brian's best. I do think that Please Let Me Wonder from today is like this song on steroids. So I prefer that. But whenever I hear this song, no matter what time of day, I will not skip it. I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the best Beach Boys songs ever.
I would go as far as saying it's probably one of the best ballads ever written. I mean, honestly, it's just such a gorgeous song. I would say that the single of I Get Around, Don't Worry Baby is one of the best double-sided singles ever. I mean, seriously, both the A side and the B side are out of this world. I think one thing that Brian did better than Phil Spector, I would say, first of all, He was a much better songwriter than Phil Spector was, because Phil Spector was a bit of a one-trick pony when it came to songwriting. The strength of Phil Spector was more in the production, because like the example I always use is like River Deep Mountain High is a well-produced song. It's a pretty shitty written song. The lyrics are pretty bad. They are. I know Nate would probably kill me for that, but it's true. Like lyric-wise, it's not really that well written. What makes it great is that Tina Turner sings the hell out of it, and it's produced really well. But what I would say this is that the chord changes in here and the chord progression is much more advanced than anything Spector could have dreamt up with. And also, I would say that the production for me takes a step further because it isn't just like drenched in so much reverb that it just almost sounds like cavernous. There's a layer to it, and it's very densely constructed. That's something that Brian, I think, took the wall of sound to newer heights that Spector had never really reached. And I think Spector, frankly, was jealous of that because Spector was a bit of a one-trick pony. Roger Christian, as you said, Riley did an amazing job with the lyrics. Like they're very like double meaning in a way that it's like I said, on the surface it just sounds like a love ballad, but it really is about a drag race, or vice versa. I definitely recommend our listeners check out the version that Ronnie Spector did, and then you can see when they play it for Brian, like on a radio show, and like he is just like
Oh yeah.
like he's just like so
Oh my
blown
God.
away. I think Dennis does a really good job too on the drums of kind of like imitating Hal Blaine's style at the beginning. And the one last thing I want to say is that lead guitar. I know there's a big debate if it's Carl or David Marks. Who do you think it is, Riley? Because you know that better.
I could see it happening either way because it doesn't really come down to style. It's not a very complicated guitar part. You're just two different chords, light, like sort of fast, sharp strumming. The story I've heard is the Beach Boys were on tour, so Brian called in David Marks to fulfill a favor, just be like, hey, can you do this quick guitar part for me? So I could totally see that happening. There's not really any, I was going to mention this, by the way, so thank you for mentioning this. I don't know, it's not really like a distinct style, so it could either be Carl or David. I could see, I could see either way. I don't think there's anything like saying it can't be David. The Beach Boys were definitely heavily touring, so it could be him. But there's no distinctness from like the style. It's not a very like unique part.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be David called in for a favor while they were touring, or it could just be Carl in the studio.
Yeah, I just know that that's hotly debated. But yeah, I mean, Brian's vocal is out of this world. Everything about this song is gorgeous. This is one of the all-time great rock ballads.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. It's one of my favorite Beach Boys ballads, and it's one of my favorite songs from the band's entire catalog. I think it's an amazing lead vocal from Brian. I feel like he really captures kind of that feeling of longing and love that is kind of described in the lyrics. I feel like it really shows how emotive his voice can be. Also, incredible group harmonies on this as well. I especially like Mike's lower bass vocals during the chorus. I think that really stands out. They're very distinctive. They add a lot to the song. And yeah, just overall, just really great production on this. I think it's one of the best sounding songs from the group's early years. And I think it really shows Brian progressing as a producer. So yeah, fantastic song. It's one of their very best. And I also want to mention, I think Matt kind of already, or Riley already alluded to this, but I like that all the guys play on this. It's not just like a Wrecking Crew track. Like that's Dennis playing the drums. I think that that's very, very cool. But some people I know like to kind of overemphasize and say like, oh, the Beach Boys, they couldn't play their own instruments, so the Wrecking Crew would do it. Well, here's an example of a really great song with really great production that all the guys played on. So that makes me appreciate the song even more. So yeah, great track. One of my favorites.
It's a very tight arrangement. It's not like a loose Surfing Safari, Surfing USA kind of arrangement. It's a very tightly arranged piece. And the fact that they are able to do that tightly arranged piece rather than that kind of loose piece is shows to go that they could play their instruments.
Yep.
Even though, because Brian was a bit more of a like perfectionist, so when it came time to include strings, of course you're going to get the Wrecking Crew. But like on this kind of track, you have the guys playing and they're doing an impressive piece. Like I said, with that quote unquote like David Marks guitar part, even though that's not like complicated, that shows how tight of an arrangement it was. Brian thought of every intricate part to the song. Mm-hmm. And these guys were doing their part just fine.
And one last thing I want to say is Garbage, the band, they actually sampled this song on their songs Push It, and I think they had to get Brian's approval, and apparently he enjoyed it so much that he asked to keep the demo CD.
Oh, wow.
Note that for later. I want to listen to it. If Brian likes it.
Anybody's a fan of Garbage. I like that one song they did.
The next track in the parking lot is another Brian and Christian tune. I think it's the last one of their collaborations to appear on a Beach Boys album, which kind of makes sense because after this, you really see the car fad just fade away. I really like this one. It's one of my favorite of like the big like three tracks on this album. It's one of my favorites that isn't one of the big three tracks. I think it shows Brian's step into like what's the word? Like unique songwriting form, non-conventional songwriting.
Yeah.
We have that little like ooh, and you kind of with the opening, you kind of think it's gonna be a different track, and then just like wave for the man in blue now, which I think is really cool. And I really love that part. And I remember mentioning this in the Beatles one that we did. She's turning up the radio dial. I love that part. And I just love the unconventional songwriting. I love, again, tight arrangements, but it's still like a rock and roll piece. It's a really cool song, and it's one that I kind of slept on for a really long time, and I'm glad I found it because it shows the strengths like of this album. Even though like this album has some shit, even the faster tracks are still pretty good. You just got to give them a listen.
This is a song that I think, like you said, kind of took me by surprise because when I first put the CD in, I hear it, I'm like, okay, it's gonna be like a doo-woppy kind of ballad thing, and then it hits you like hits you like a ton of bricks. It's like
Like a T-bird.
like
It's like a
a, we're the first to hit the lot and wave to the man in blue now. So I like how it like has those different sections that kind of all come together, where it kind of oscillates between like the more like slow doo-woppy parts and the more upbeat like rocker parts. I think it's a very underrated tune. It's definitely like one of those like chestnuts that's hidden in their catalog that isn't really well known by like the general public, but definitely deserves a second look. I think it's also like a pretty good lyric. I think it's like kind of like fun and playful, but not corny, because I know sometimes they could get a little corny with this. Like it's just like, hey, we're just hanging out in the parking lot, but we're having fun doing it.
Fun, fun, fun.
This is another good one of those tracks that's like it's both a car song, but it's also about a song which is hooking up with somebody. And you can also tell this is American because you say parking lot. If this was Britain, it would be a car lot, or what they call it, like a car park or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
Fucking car park.
Car park, that's what they call it in
Okay.
Britain. But yeah, no, I think as far as like for like one of the last Christian co-writes, I think this was a pretty high note to go out on. So I think it's a very fun song and definitely pretty slept on in the catalog.
Yeah, so I'm kind of with you guys on this one. I remember the first couple times I heard it, it didn't do that much for me. I was kind of like, oh, whatever, like it's fine. But yeah, after like listening to it more over the past year or so, it's honestly grown on me quite a bit. I think it's a pretty solid track. I really like the pretty vocal harmonies at the beginning, like Riley mentioned, and kind of like what you said, it's interesting songwriting, and that you think it's going to be one thing, but then it really turns into kind of like an upbeat rock and roll number, which I think is pretty neat. I think the melody's pretty catchy as well. I like the do ronde backing vocals. I think that was really good to include that. I don't think it's quite as strong, or I don't think it's actually near as strong as the two tracks that preceded it on Shutdown. But that said, as an album track, I do think it's pretty fun and enjoyable. And like you guys said, I think this is one that's definitely worth another listen if you haven't heard it in a while. Because honestly, it's a pretty fun little track. So, all right, track number 4.
We have reached the point in the Beach Boys catalog where they start thinking they're comedians. So,
spoiler alert, they're not.
they are, but not when they write out their comedy. We have Cash is Love for Sonny Wilson, which I think the more interesting thing to talk about with this song, well, it's not a song, this track is like, I don't know. Brian's kind of always been a funny guy, and I'm curious if he thought that this was going to be better than it actually was. Like, I'm curious if they thought they would actually get somewhere with this track, like people would actually like it. And what also makes me curious is why the fuck does Mike Love and Brian Wilson have a songwriting credit on this one? Like, did they spend time in the writer's room? Like, all right, next thing you're going to say this.
They probably just spitballed this into a mic.
Maybe they viewed it because they included a bunch of Brian and Mike songs in it. They were like, well, let's just say it's Brian and Mike again.
I'm surprised all the guys didn't fight for a credit on this. They should have, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, like, but I don't know, like because they keep doing this. I mean, I've always defended Bull Sessions, but I'm not gonna say it's fucking good. I just think it's a cool like epilogue to today. But like, I'm never gonna go listen to it on its own.
Well, and that at least is at the end of the record. This is smack right in the middle of the side, and
yeah, like that's what I mean. Like, did Brian think that this track would actually be bigger than it was? Like, did he think that he would get like people would like it in the middle of the track? Did he think that people would enjoy their little sketch comedy? Like,
I kind of think like maybe they viewed it as a way to kind of give the members more of a personality, like to like the public, you know, because maybe like, you know, like obviously like the Beatles, like they kind of each had their own distinctive thing. You know, I know that they were just blowing up in the States when this album came out, but like, you know, I kind of think like maybe it was a way to be like, oh, like, you know, like here's Mike being funny, you know, here's Brian's personality, here's Carl kind of already being like the peacekeeper of the group, you know, like defending Brian and stuff. So
All right, guys, settle down. Let's not fight.
right, like he's like, I think Brian's voice sounds good in the ballads, you know. So
let
I
me
kind of do it. Go ahead, Matt.
if this band had debuted 20 years later, there wouldn't have been a need for this because MTV was already a thing. That's where you show off the personality.
Yeah, but they would also have to make their albums like 50 minutes longer.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm just saying
They would suck in the
just
CD
say my
era.
opinion on this. This is my
Spoiler alert, they did suck in the CD era.
This is my
No, they didn't.
thoughts on this. I think it's corny. I think that yes, they can be funny, but my issue is that I think it's very corny, and I think that if you're trying to show this to somebody that doesn't know much about the Beach Boys and you compare it to the Beatles, I'm sorry, I'm bringing up the Beatles again. They were a lot more witty. This is just corny. It's very corny. I don't think it's particularly funny. I think it's just to fill time on an album. And I think the most interesting thing about this is that if you don't know who Cassius Clay is, that was Muhammad Ali's original name. There you go. So
yeah, I like how Mike loves Muhammad Ali.
I think it's just a waste of time. I think it's a waste of time. I always skip it. I think I've maybe
That's a good point though, because you know the Beatles were like not only were they witty, they're just like naturally funny guys.
Right. Yeah.
That they weren't trying to be funny, because reporters would ask them like serious questions, and then they would come up with the funniest things off the top of their head.
Yeah.
they take the
Here's
piss.
the
Like,
Beach Boys trying to force themselves to be funny, and it doesn't really work out so well.
I think I've maybe listened to this once in its entirety.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Matt on this one. This might have been like re-listening to it for this episode. This might have been the second or third time I've ever listened to the full thing. Yeah, it's filler, like all these spoken word tracks are. And again, kind of like what Matt said, like really, it does kind of come off as a waste of time, especially when you compare it to like, you know, like the Beatles albums that were coming out around this time and stuff. That said, I hate to say it, but I was kind of smiling at a couple of lines during this. I laughed at the Mickey Mouse of the sore throat thing. I do think that's funny. And yeah, I'd already mentioned this, but I do kind of like to how Carl is already kind of coming off as the peacekeeper in the group on this, where he's defending Brian's voice. I also was kind of laughing at the end where Brian and Mike are mocking each other while they're doing fun again. I thought that was kind of funny too. So yeah, I acknowledge it's stupid filler for sure. And I do wish that it wasn't in the middle of the album. But I do think there is a little bit of charm to it. That said, though, if I had to choose, I wish it wasn't included on here. I wish it was like a fun little outtake that was included on like a box set or something, you know, for us to listen to. But like on here, it just kind of comes off as very corny, like you said, Matt.
Or just stick it at the end of the side. That's what I always say. Stick it at the end of the side. So stick the crap at the end of the side so you just turn the dial off.
Oh, yeah. It's like most of the crap's already over there. So like just move it over.
Stick it at the end of side one. Exactly. Or like what you might as well just do is just take a needle and just drag it over the record. And there you go. Just skip right over it anyway, anytime.
Yeah, I'll stick it over everything that wasn't Mickey Mouse, the sore throat.
You have to find the exact portion in the vinyl where that comes on and just mark it mentally.
Also, one other thing. At the beginning of this recording, when they say someone says, "Hi, this is Al," why does that sound? Is that Brian? Because it sounds way more like Brian than it does to Al to me.
I think
Maybe I'm
pretty sure that's Al.
okay, because I swear, like I know Brian's voice.
It was probably Al introducing himself to the group, because this was the first album where he was an official member.
Okay. Because now I just like when I heard that, I like re-listened to it a couple times. I'm just like, is that Al or is that Brian acting like he's Al? Like,
I don't know.
He's also much younger. You kind of hear his voice from like 64 when like they were on like Ed Sullivan and stuff. He does sound a bit different than he did in like the 70s.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, honestly, I feel like this band, I feel like for like especially new listeners, it can be really hard to tell these guys' voices apart, especially Brian, Carl, and Al. I feel like, you know, it does take a little bit of time to kind of like get the different, you know, tell the different elements of their voice apart. Where like someone like Mike, yeah, that's pretty distinctive. Dennis, I think, has a pretty distinctive voice. But, you know, but then those three, yeah, they kind of do blend together very well. So
they do. And Bruce is easy to tell once he comes in because it's just, ooh, joy. Or I can't do his voice.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Riley does
the trouble you had wasn't so bad.
Trouble you had.
No, but I will say this. I do think
they all could be California.
Ocean lovers.
The speaking voices, I think, are a lot less distinct when they were younger. Because even sometimes when you listen to Dennis's speaking voice before his voice got really gruff like this, sounds pretty similar to like a lot of the other guys. Like I'm thinking back now to that interview on Dick Clark, where they're on American Bandstand, and then like Dick Clark is like, "What is the album called?" And Al's like, "Fun, fun, fun." He's like, "The album is called Fun, Fun, Fun." It was like Al doesn't even know like what the hell to say. You could tell there was no PR training back then. It was just say whatever the
Yeah.
hell you wanted.
Yeah, they did sound very like all like 4 out of 5 of them sounded very similar
Other
in
than
60.
Mike, yeah, they all
Yeah.
sounded very similar.
A lot, like these talking voices especially, because I mean they were all like early 20s, late teens.
Yeah,
So
but
I think once they kind of all like matured into like full grown adults is when they like really that's when your voices start to like crack a little bit and you get older and signs of aging really show.
and especially like signs of this and this and
Now that I have lost my Diane.
Waiting for my angel come home.
oh, like that's a lot of this, and some of this.
Yeah, some with the Beach Boys, it's a lot of everything. Yeah, some of this, some
Some of this too. Some of
yeah.
this too.
Just some.
Okay.
All right.
They didn't all keep it clean, that's for sure.
One of them definitely did.
One of them definitely did.
Not all of them took good care of their feet either.
Oh boy.
Oh, can you cut that out of the episode, please?
Okay, next song. Next song.
We got a little carried away there, didn't we?
We did.
All right. Now we have what I consider it is in my top 10 Beach Boys songs. Warmth of the Sun. Uh yeah, it's incredible. The chord progression is different. It's not like a classic ballad progression that you found Brian doing around this time with like Ballad of Old Betsy and Spirit of America. It's very much like one of the Brian's first ventures into creative chord progressions just in general. You have incredible lyrics from Mike, some of Mike's best lyrics, maybe his best lyrics. It's just this is one of the band's first truly mature songs. You have a couple in there before, but like this is them like going straight. This is like Pet Sounds level mature. I love the guitar on it. I don't know. There's not much else I could say than it's just like a gorgeous, beautiful song. Everything that could go right with this song went right. Beautiful harmonies, beautiful vocals, beautiful instrumentation, great lyrics, great progression. One of Brian's best, and it really shows his genius. I really can't say much else.
Basically everything you said. It's super lushly produced. It's beautifully sung. It's beautifully arranged. It has great chord progression. Mike's probably the best. So the best lyrics Mike ever wrote. Like you said, very mature for the era, very ahead of its time, very introspective. And I want to say I'm very glad that this ended up on Endless Summer because I think that gave this a more raised profile than it had before. Because I don't think this was a super well known song before then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the B side to Dance Dance Dance, so maybe some people knew it. But outside of that, like I said, this was a bit more of a deep cut before that, so that's always really nice. And yeah, it's just a very gorgeous song, and it's like side A, you have like the three heavy hitters, and it's kind of downhill from there. But we still have some decent stuff to come. But you know, this is definitely like one of the titans on the record.
Yeah, for me, I pretty much agree with everything you guys said. I think this is a very haunting ballad on probably one of the more underrated songs in the group's early catalog. I know, like you guys mentioned, it's appeared on some compilations over the years, but still, I think like when you compare this to some of their other early ballads, I still feel like a lot of casual listeners aren't quite as familiar with this one. But I think it's every bit as good as a lot of their other classic early ballads. I think it's has some very emotive and moving vocals from Brian. I really love his falsetto on this. I think his voice just sounds incredible throughout the entire track. As well as the backing harmonies from the rest of the guys. I also really love the lyrics on this as well. As you guys mentioned, they're very melancholic. And even though I know the song's not about the JFK assassination, I do think it definitely captures kind of the somber mood the country was feeling around that time when that happened. So, yeah, I think it's a very moving song, very emotional. And for me, it's right up there with Don't Worry Baby as the best song in the album. So I think it's absolutely beautiful. And it's definitely one of the ones I come back to the most from this record. So I love it.
Yeah, for me, it is the best song on the album. Up next, we have This Car of Mine. I do really like this one, but I feel like it is, after a re-listen, it is a bit unfinished. I feel like it could have used a little bit more, maybe on the production side. I think Dennis gives a very full, like, good-hearted vocal, but again, I feel like it just needs a little bit more. But it is still a solid album track, and I do come back to it from time to time. But yeah, it's just a little unfinished. I feel like Brian was really working on the quote unquote, as Matt said, Titans on the album more than these kind of tracks that were really just throwaways in the end. As good as they were, it is a lot of fun, and I do enjoy it, but little unfinished, kind of like Lana, except a step down.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like you said, it's a bit half baked, but it's very charming, and I think Dennis gives a very earnest vocal, and it's kind of fun too. And I do like the backing vocals, the diddly hop hop diddly hop, like as the coda of the song. I really like those too. But yeah, it's a very charming song. It's a very charming song. I think it fits Dennis's vocal well. I think he definitely had that like teen idol appeal for sure. Like he was the most stereotypical teen idol of the group, both in terms of looks, but also I think just in terms of like his vibe and his vocals. It was very earnest everyman, and I could just see the girls swooning to this. And so yeah, it's a very charming song, albeit a little half baked. Could have used a little bit more fleshing out, but not a bad way to end the side.
Yeah, for me, this is like an okay album track. I don't think it's as fun and memorable as In the Parking Lot, but I do like Dennis's lead vocal on it, and the lyrics are kind of fun as well, like Matt mentioned. I like the line, "I remember the day when I chose her over all those old broken junkers." For whatever reason, I always laugh at that line, but yeah, I think it's fine in the context of the album, but it's not really one I come back to very often. And I'll also say that I don't know how great of a decision it was to put this right after The Warmth of the Sun. I almost feel like it would have been better to sequence it after In the Parking Lot. You know, I just feel like it's kind of an extreme come down from like this really moving and gorgeous ballad to like this kind of like half baked, kind of whatever, like fun little ditty, you know, after The Warmth of the Sun. So I don't know. I personally think like this album in general could use a bit of a resequencing, definitely cut some tracks, maybe include some of these other projects that Brian was working on at the time. But yeah, this one I think is decent, but it's definitely not one I really come back to outside the context of the album. So
All right, we're moving on to side two. We have a cover. Why Do Fools Fall in Love?
mhm.
This was one I never really cared for at first, but in the recent, I guess, year, it's really come around on me. And after listening to it for today's episode, I really enjoy it. I think it's a fantastic cover. I think I would probably listen to it now as much as I would listen to the original. I mean, I think the original is fantastic, but this one kind of has that Beach Boy charm to it. It definitely brings the energy. I think that the vocals are great, per usual. I don't think they did anything like crazy with the instrumentation. You do see that more later on with covers of like Do You Want to Dance, where they really like change the arrangements. But that being said, I think it's a great cover. I think this is very fitting for the Beach Boys, and I'm glad it's come around on me because it definitely makes the album a lot more enjoyable. And it has officially made my Beach Boys playlist, so it has that going for it.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the first songs where we get this has a lot of Wrecking Crew on it, and you can tell because it is a lot
Yeah.
fleshed out arrangement wise. Yeah, I think it's a very good cover of the original. Is it better than the Frankie Lyman version? I would say no, but that's just because that's like one of the all-time greats in early rock and roll. But I do think it is a very good cover. And I do think that Brian gives a very good lead vocal on it, and the harmonies are really good. And I think it's a great way to start off side too. I just don't think it's quite as good as the Frankie Lyman version, but that's comparing it to a Titan as I used before. That's one of the all-time great early rock songs. As this stands, it's a great cover, and it's a great way to start off side two.
Yeah, so Riley pretty much took like literally every single word from my mouth for this one. I used to not really care for it that much either. But then, yeah, like Riley said, re-listening to it recently, like over the past couple months, and then today for doing this episode, yeah, it's grown on me quite a bit, and it's now on my Beach Boys playlist as well. I think production-wise, I think this is one of the stronger tracks on the album. I really love the drumming on it. It's got that really heavy sound to it, very kind of like Spectre-like. I think that's how Blaine. So really like the drums. I think it gives the song a lot of energy and power. I wouldn't say it's one of my like absolute favorite Beach Boys covers. I probably would agree with Matt that I do slightly prefer the original recording by, what is it, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. I would say theirs is superior because I really do like Frankie's vocals on that one. And I also love that saxophone solo halfway through too. That said, though, I do think the production on the Beach Boys version is really great. And I also really like, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but on that Summer Love Songs compilation, they have that little instrumental intro to this song that didn't make the cut. But they found it on like the tapes and they included it on the Summer Love Songs compilation. I actually really like that little instrumental intro. I wish they had kept it. I think it's really beautiful. So yeah, personally, that's the version that I come back to. And that's the version I added to my Beach Boys playlist. But yeah, overall, I think this is a pretty solid cover. I definitely like it a lot more than I did like a year ago, and it's definitely one that's grown on me for sure. But still not quite to the point where like I regularly come back to it. So
All right, Jake's favorite. One of the final Brian Wilson and Gary Usher songs on a Beach Boys album is
oh
a
god.
fucking letdown, in my opinion. Because especially at this time in their partnership, they're writing shit like "In My Room." Think about it. They wrote "In My Room" for Surfer Girl, and 2 albums later, they come out with a song called "Pom Pom Playgirl," which is a minute and a half of pure. This is definitely a Beach Boys songness. I don't want to like sound like a douchebag because I do think there's qualities of the song that I appreciate. But this is what you would come out with if you asked like Chat GPT to write a Beach Boys song. It's like, write a Beach Boys song. All right, here's a song about a cheerleader. And it's just like all verse. And the chorus is pom pom play girl. I don't know. I think what makes me upset is because there are some qualities to it I like. I do like the drumming on it. I do like Carl's guitar part, but it just exists. And for something to come out of the partnership that made "We'll Run Away" and "In My Room" and "Lonely Sea," you have what is just also that doesn't have the excuse of being like, oh, this is 1962 Beach Boys. No, this is Beach Boys in arguably Brian's songwriting peak with just a song that exists. This is just a Beach Boys song. It is very much a letdown for me. But yeah, I stand by what I said. It's like if you asked AI to write a Beach Boys song. Like I said, I like the drums, I like the guitar, but it's just fucking boring, man. Nothing comes out of it.
I used to like this a lot more, but like the more I thought about it, yeah, it's very mid. It's very Fortunately, this wasn't the last Brian Wilson, Gary Usher song to ever appear on a record, and the last one that did was a hell of a lot better than this. But this is just very, like you said, it's such a letdown. It's very just meh. It's very. What was the term that Paul McCartney used to use? Like the work songs. This is what it basically is. It's like a work song. It's like we need to fill up an album. Let's just write something quick. I think the only thing that's kind of cool about it, other than what you mentioned, is that it's a Carl vocal, a Carl lead. It's one of his earliest leads. But that's about it. That's why I think I used to rate it a little bit higher because I'm like, oh, cool, you get to hear a young Carl sing. But yeah, no, the song itself, it sucks. It's just not that good. And this is the beginning of the disappointments. There's more to come after this, but this is the first disappointment.
Yeah, so I've made my thoughts on this song pretty clear on some previous episodes. If any of our longtime listeners have heard them, I'm not a fan of this song at all. Pretty much everything you guys said. I don't find it that interesting musically. I also think the lyrics are pretty stupid too. I'm the same guy that like jokes about songs like Male Ego, but like in those songs, like the lyrics, I appreciate them in like a so bad they're good kind of way. Like this is so stupid, I actually can appreciate it. But like on this one, I don't know. I just think the lyrics are just dumb. I also find the little hand clapping section kind of annoying and unnecessary. Again, it kind of just feels like, oh, like what should we add to the song next? Let's just do that. It just feels very lazy to me. And then of course all the shouting at the end with like the woo and the wave those pom poms all around. Like it's just like, oh my god.
Get Bruce to say it. Wave those pom poms all around.
Have Bruce sing it on Shamu. It's going to be a lot better.
Yeah, but yeah, never been a fan of this one at all. I doubt I ever will be a fan of it. And again, I think it's very unfortunate that this was the song they chose as Carl's first like solo lead vocal because, in my opinion, it's one of the weakest songs in the band's entire catalog. So, easily a skip for me. And I think, as Riley mentioned as well, really weak chorus as well, like the pom pom play girl.
That's
like it's
all you have to offer for a chorus. No wonder the song's a minute and a half. You didn't even write a chorus, dude. It's just
right. It just the whole thing just feels lazy. It does feel like, okay, write a filler song, like the Chat GPT thing. That's a perfect way to describe it, Riley.
Yeah, or like I said, I know Paul McCartney used to say that about like certain songs the Beatles just throw together, like, oh, it's a work song. Like I think they said about like what's that one? I Want to Be Your Man, the one that Ringo sings.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
so boring they gave it to the Stones.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's something with
It
John.
only get it was only successful because it had the Paul McCartney and John Lennon songwriting credit.
Okay, now for a much better song.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. So this is Keep an Eye on Summer. This is one of two Brian Wilson and Bob Norberg writes in the catalog, and all with the two songs they did, Your Summer Dream and Keep an Eye on Summer. I am honestly upset they did not write anything else together, or at least that was released. because holy shit, this song is incredible. This was a sleeper in the Beach Boys catalog. After you kind of get through the first couple of tracks, or I guess like side A of Shutdown Volume 2, I've always just discredited side 2 as just shit. Keep an Eye on Summer is incredible. Beautiful progression. You really hear the jazziness from like their four freshmen influence, especially on this one. And I'm curious if Bob Norberg had any help in the actual like chord progression part of the songs, because this one and Your Summer Dream are very jazzy tunes. And so I don't know, but it's just gorgeous. It really does feel like the late August, school's about to start kind of vibe to it. It's just gorgeous. I really wish they wrote more songs together because they clearly had something going with Your Summer Dream and Keep an Eye on Summer. But fortunately, for whatever reason, they didn't. So
They didn't keep the summer alive.
They really had a good thing going, but I guess they couldn't hang on to themselves. Anyway,
Can hang out of their ego.
no, that's a Bowie reference. Anyway, yeah.
Is that a druggy song, Brian? Is that a druggy reference? Oh, is that a druggy reference, Jake? Huh? Is that a reference to drugs, Jake?
No, I
Can't
swear.
afford to do that on our show, Jake.
We're gonna lose.
Don't
Okay,
fuck with the formula.
Okay, anyway, this by far the best thing on side 2. By far, not even the contest.
Yeah.
Really beautiful song. This goes back to, and I know I used it before, I'll say it again. This is that wistful optimism or whatever I said before, where it's like it's both kind of like kind of melancholic optimism. It's both very melancholic, but it's also hopeful. Like it'll be through a tear. Keep an eye on summer this year. Very beautiful song. Great chord progression. Great vocal. Great lyrics. Really, really, just such a beautiful song. And it really, really, I would have loved to have seen more collaborations with Brian Wilson and Bob Norberg. And like I said, by far the best thing on side 2. Not even close.
Yeah, everything you guys said. I think it's a really amazing ballad. Definitely the highlight of side 2 for me as well. I think it has a really strong melody. I love the lead vocal from Brian. I think he sings it so beautifully. And I also really like the melancholic lyrics as well. It has that sense of longing that a lot of like the classic Brian Wilson ballads have. I also really like the bridge section or the middle 8 on this song. I think it's very pretty. And honestly, this whole song, like the themes of this song, like about like, like soon we'll be graduating and we'll be so far apart, kind of reminds me of a song like Graduation Day from the Four Freshmen, which the Beach Boys also did like a cover of. So definitely some similarities there. I wouldn't say the song is quite as strong as the other ballads on here, but that said, I do still really enjoy it, and it's definitely my pick for the most underrated or overlooked song in the album. So I really like this one a lot.
All right. Shutdown Part 2.
Part
It
2.
certainly exists. It's definitely an instrumental they did with Carl Wilson on lead guitar.
And a killer horn solo at the start, killer sax there.
Yeah, we get to see the greatest sax solo ever make its reprise appearance.
Oh, it's got to. It's iconic.
And we can't forget Mike's count in either.
That's the best part of the song for me. It's just, oh my God. It's just, I always stand up for the surf like instrumentals, but dude, I don't think I could even call this a surf instrumental. It's just an instrumental and it exists. It's there. I'm glad Carl's getting like a songwriting credit. And I do think that Carl will get better. Well, he only has one other like instrumental that he's made in Carl's Big Chance, which I think is far better than this. I think that this one's just, it's fine. But it's really just filler and a chance for Carl to get a songwriting credit.
Yeah, I mean it's good practice for him too, I guess, for the guitar, but it's just there. The one silver lining, it's the better of the two instrumentals. It's got that going for it. But
yeah, that's true.
It's just there. This is really like this we could make this a case that the next 3 songs is the worst 3-song run in the Beach Boys catalog. We could make a case for that. It's up there for sure.
I think we can.
That would be a fun episode idea. Best 3-song runs, worst 3-song.
Well, this is definitely a contender for one of the worst. I will say that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm going to shock Riley with this one, but
honestly, fuck you.
I kind of like it. I don't think it's anything spectacular. Like, it's not something I'm going to rate.
This over Stoked?
Yeah.
No, you're crazy.
I like it more than Stoked. Yeah, it's nothing mind blowing, but I think it does have a good groove to it, and I actually kind of enjoy the song more as it progresses. Like at the start, I'm kind of like okay, but then as it goes on, I kind of like it. Also, I knew that Carl played guitar on this, but I kind of had forgotten that he actually had a writing credit on it. So I think that that's kind of cool. And it definitely makes me appreciate it more than I would have otherwise. But yeah, even though I would agree with you guys that it was just included on the album to fill space, like I'm not going to argue with someone that says like, oh, it's filler. Like it definitely comes off as that. But I can still get some enjoyment out of it. And it's definitely not my least favorite track on side 2 of this record. So I think it's an okay instrumental, but not spectacular.
Jake, I think you have like some sort of Stockholm syndrome with this album. They define like the only song I have to like this song. I have to. You define some song on side 2 to really like.
No, so this one, honestly, like even before doing this episode, like it's grown on me over time. Like I remember listening to it last year and being like, yeah, it's fine, it's fine.
Does this song exist so that they can name the album Shutdown Volume 2? Because if they didn't have a song called Shutdown Part 2 or whatever, then they'd be lost. So, wow.
All right, so
Louis, we gotta go. The the least energetic cover of what I consider a the garage rock titan. There's so many covers of this song, and so many of them provide energy. This one is not. It's lost. It's like Summertime Blues from Surfing Safari, but like on steroids. It's just like it's so boring and like lost. It has no energy to it. Like there's versions out there, like the Stooges do a great cover. Granted, the Stooges came a couple of years later, so they could use like overdrive and shit. But like I think the Beach Boys could have done a solid cover. They definitely bring energy to a lot of songs. But this one, holy shit, they just like came into the studio off like 2 hours of sleep or something. It's like, oh my God, it's boring. Mike's bass is a little too Mike. Like I wish they got like some sort of like studio person to do it. They didn't even have to do a bass part. Louie, Louie. Well, I could see like Dennis wailing on this one, but something like, dude, just some new arrangement because they could have done good, but what a fucking letdown. I call it shutdown. It's a fucking letdown.
You're more like shit down.
I'll keep it brief. To be blunt, this is a Limp Dick cover of one of the most, like you said, like the Kingsman version is one of the greatest rock songs ever recorded. It is amazing. This is just no energy, a mess in all the worst ways. And why this ever ended up on the Best of the Beach Boys Volume 1 is totally beyond me. There must have been somebody trolling at Capitol to decide to put that on there because it fucking sucks.
They probably didn't know the Beach Boys, so they was like, oh, Louie, Louie, that's a hit. Let's just put it on there.
It sucks. It's terrible.
That's it, Matt? Nothing else? All right. Yeah, for me, yeah, pretty much what you guys said. Not a great cover. I wouldn't say I absolutely despise it in the way that Matt does, but I do think it's very unmemorable, and the Kingsman version absolutely blows it out of the water. Obviously, there's a lot of artists that have covered this song over the years. I've listened to like the original version. I forgot the name of the artist, but I think theirs is better. Also, yeah. Also, the Kinks did it. I think the Kinks did it better. So yeah, this song, yeah, it just comes off as very just limp, like Matt said, and also Mike's that gets old very quickly. So yeah, not a fan of this one at all, and yeah, just kind of just chugs along. It's just kind of there, so it's a whatever track.
Yeah, I might have been a little bit more explicit than just calling it limp.
I'm a huge fan of the Kingsman version though. So like when I
Yeah,
heard
I think it's great. I like
cover, I was like, oh dude, this is cool. I can see the Beach Boys doing a great job, and it's just I think maybe it's not so much bad as much as it's just a fucking letdown.
Yeah,
Beach Boys could have killed this.
It could have been really good. You're right. Like if they had done it like in the style of like Surfing Safari or something, it would have been pretty good. But
yeah, dude, add some like sharper guitars in there. Give it a great lead guitar in there. Just give it something. New arrangement. They could have killed it.
I think they tried to make it too polished. That's the problem. This song, you need to be raucous. It doesn't.
You don't need Mike's. You don't need vocal harmonies to have a good track. But I guess that was their signature, so I guess they had to.
No, and doesn't like the Kingsman version too have like some organ on it too? I think that's kind of like what makes it memorable too, is you have that cool little organ part where like the Beach Boys had already been messing around with organ parts on a lot of their songs by this point. Brian was using them pretty early on, so like why not have an organ on this too? Like even if it sounds a little similar to.
Oh yeah, we've reached Brian into the point of his career where he is like a solid arranger producer, where he's already like halfway through like becoming a good producer. He has
Right.
no reason like not to include.
Like it's one thing if they had done this cover on like Surfing USA or something or Surfing Safari, but like we are well past the point now where like yeah, Brian's already writing some of his like career masterpieces, and like to put out a kind of just a whatever cover like this, yeah, like you said, it's just very disappointing. So
They had the bright idea to replace the organ intro and all that of the Kingsman version with the duh, 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 duh.
So speaking of disappointing, Denny's drums, um, dude, all right, like we've reached the point where there's no excuses for it. This is just filler. Like they just needed to fill up space. So what do? They had Dennis and Hal Blaine play drums. I'm like 90% sure that this is actually just Hal Blaine. All right. It's just drums for and not like Keith Moon, Ginger Baker, John Bonham drums.
Or
No,
like,
no, no. This is like 1964 drums, where drum solos weren't really a thing. Mostly like in jazz.
yeah, and this isn't jazz.
Far from it.
It's I love Dennis. I don't know who's playing this, but it's a waste of time. The one good thing about this is it makes Winds of Change look good by comparison as a closer.
hell yeah.
It does. But yeah, it's just and it's at the end of the record. So
But yeah, the best thing I could say is that it definitely keeps in time.
I guess I mean it's
It follows a time signature perfectly, so I can give it that.
this could very well be the worst album closer they ever did, honestly.
Oh, so, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I was gonna say this is for a band that's put out quite a few questionable album closers over the years. This is definitely their worst, in my opinion. Like Matt said, complete waste of time. It does not get any more filler than this. Like you look up the word filler in the dictionary, this should be right fucking next to it. It should just say, "See Denny's drums," because that's pretty much what this is. I've also heard the Hal Blaine thing before too, Riley, that like it's not even Dennis, which is also kind of like stupid too. Like they're calling it Denny's drums and it might not even be Dennis. But yeah, it's not even interesting drumming. It's just kind of like whatever. Like, yeah, even if it was interesting drumming, it would still feel like a waste of time. But like the fact that it's not even that fun to listen to either as a drum solo, it's just kind of like whatever. So yeah, it's a waste of time. And yeah, like even compared to like our favorite recording sessions, I prefer our favorite recording sessions as closer to All Summer Long, and I do this to Shutdown. So
I prefer freaking Bull Session with the Big Daddy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, I do too. That too. Yeah, yeah.
Dick Rising. That's got Dick Rising.
Yeah, we gotta.
Denny's drums doesn't have Dick Rising.
I don't know. I mean,
Dick's drums.
I think about it. They have some pretty bad closers. There's this. There's the Shift.
Man, we hate the Shift, man.
I think we
hate the Shift.
I think maybe Jake, we have a certain episode coming out in the future where we could talk about our least favorite album tracks.
Yeah, I think I've heard a rumor about that. Interesting.
It rhymes with horse shit.
I've heard a rumor from Ground Control. Don't say it's true.
Rhymes with horse shit. Rhymes with horse shit album compilation. All right. Yeah. Do we want to move into some of the quote unquote bonus tracks?
Yeah, let's talk about them.
So as stated, Brian back with the touring group, so he wasn't able to do many of his side projects. He did a couple of things with the Honeys around this time, but other than that, it was basically touring and Beach Boys like studio stuff. However, during the Don't Worry Baby sessions, it's been said that he worked on a song with Gary Usher called Sacramento, which is honestly not very Beach Boys sounding. It's a very different sounding track compared to anything else that he's come out with before. It reminds me more of like what was happening in New York with like the folk scene rather than anything out in California. I think Gary Usher's singing it, but it's a good track. I think he wrote this with Brian. I kind of wish that this song could have had a reworking and took the place of Pom Pom Playgirl. And because if you want to have a Gary Usher Brian track, at least give it to Sacramento because it was made around the time. Yeah. I do enjoy it. I don't think it's anything special, but if it was reworked and rearranged, it definitely could have at least made the album as something rather than fucking Pom Pom Playgirl. But I can also see why it was just left for Gary Usher. But it was a very enjoyable track.
Yeah, it's a very solid, enjoyable track. And like you said, it's a bit different from what you'd expect that like what they were doing at the time. And this has the Honeys on backing vocals, I believe.
Yeah,
it sounds like them. But yeah, no, it's a very solid track, and I definitely think it's better than some of the stuff that ended up on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like this one quite a bit. It's probably like one of my favorite songs that I've heard from Gary. I think it's a really solid track. Really great production on this from Brian, and some nice backing vocals from the Honeys as well. And yeah, like you said, Riley, it doesn't really sound much like a Beach Boys type song, like a Brian Wilson type song. Honestly, I could see somebody like a Glenn Campbell covering this really well. I feel like it's more to his style. I could see his voice really fitting this song well. So yeah, I think it's a solid track. I don't think it's anything like absolutely like mind blowing, but like I definitely think it deserved more attention than it got. I think it was released as like a standalone single. I don't think it really did anything. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen something done with it for sure. But it would
Definitely
definitely
worth a listen if you haven't heard it already. It's called if you didn't hear it well, it's Sacramento by Gary Usher.
the Sacramento, and it's on. I don't think it's on streaming, but it's on YouTube. You can easily find it on YouTube. So yeah,
And it definitely shows Brian branching out other styles rather than what he was doing, which I think is pretty cool.
yeah, yep.
Do we want to talk about the Larry Denton one?
It's up to you. Your call.
I don't know, man. It was not even worth it.
Well, why don't you just want to just like describe what it was? Just mention it real quick.
Dude, it was a fucking song. That's what it was. Like I was really scrapping for like what else can we include besides Shutdown Volume 2 tracks. But when you look at, and you could probably keep this in anyways, like when you look at 1964 and the Beach Boys, with Brian back in the touring band and the pressure to compete with the Beatles, Beach Boys released 4 albums that required studio work. Even their live album had studio stuff done for it in 1964. You have Shutdown Volume 2, All Summer Long, Christmas album, and the In Concert album. And Brian, not besides 4 studio albums, you have Brian touring in like, dude, they were so busy. You really start to see Brian like plummet from all the pressure. So like when you do see some of their like quote unquote like outtakes or like side projects or whatever, it's not even close to what Brian was doing in 63, where he had plenty of time on his hands because he wasn't touring. I don't know, this Larry Denton one, it was fine. I don't think it was better than anything I heard on Shutdown. Well, it's probably better than Denny's drums, but like it's not saying much.
Yeah, I listened to it once. It's good production for sure from Brian, I think, but like as a song, it didn't do much for me. I'm very indifferent on the vocals on this. I'm very kind of like, like do I? It's a unique vocal, but it's not really a good vocal. So like I don't really know. It's whatever. I don't really know any of the history behind this track.
The track is called "Endless Sleep" by Larry.
Endless Sleep. Yes, Endless Sleep.
And it definitely makes me go to sleep. So
I went to sleep.
Yeah. Yo, I mean, I'm glad. Yeah, it's fine. It is what it is.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to the reviews
and chart history. Yeah.
Chart history. It peaked at number 13.
Their first to miss the top 10 since Surface.
Yeah, a little bit disappointing for sure.
Probably because Beatles.
But yeah, dude, like when I'm curious to how this album would have done because it is like all things considered compared to like a lot of albums from like early 64, it is solid. It's just when you compare it to like the classics that came out, 65, 66 is nothing. But honestly, it's songwriting wise, the highs are the strongest they've ever been. But also you have the Beatles, and this is released about like a month after the Beatles were in the States, which a month is a long time. Beatles were everywhere, and they could not compare to their sales. The Beatles could release. I'm going to go back to the Noel Gallagher quote on Radiohead. The Beatles could shit into a microphone and people would be like, because it's the Beatles. They were everywhere. They were fucking huge. And this really caused Brian to like start to go down a little bit of a spiral. You kind of hear him like in interviews saying that he got really scared when the Beatles came in because it's his first real sense of competition because all they were going against were the Four Seasons. I love the Four Seasons, but
didn't he also say that he thought "I Want to Hold Your Hand" was not a good record or something?
Yeah, but I don't think that matters. I think what mattered was like the commercialness and like the fact that they had intense competition. They were really hard for them. They were like on top for a little bit, and like a month after that, boom, Beatlemania. And it's a pattern you start to see going down the Beach Boys path. However, good news is they will have their first #1 hit very soon. It's my favorite song of all time. So they weren't quite yet second place, but definitely impacted them pretty fast. And in terms of like everybody wanted to get a Beatles record and not buy Danny's drums and Louie Louie.
and Pom Pom Play.
My lord, a record collection isn't complete without those.
Yeah, I think
I
you've,
will,
Matt, I think you've said before that like sometimes these early Beach Boys albums don't hold up the best against some of the early like Beatles albums. I feel like this is one where like if you compare it to like let's say something like what's that?
Meet the Beatles. Oh yeah, it's like not even a
Right. It's in terms of like just consistency. Like, yeah, the highs are definitely there, and you could argue that the highs are higher than some of the Beatles highs. But in terms of like, yeah, the filler and stuff, like there's just so much filler on this album compared to those early Beatles albums. And again, I don't think the early Beatles albums are perfect by any means. I mean, I think they had some really great early albums, like Hard Day's Night. I absolutely love from start to finish. But like Please Please Me, there's some filler on there. I feel like, but I feel like the filler there is more enjoyable than something like Pom Pom Playgirl.
You have to compare it to the U.S. albums because most people weren't hearing those ones. So you have to look at
That's right.
Second and all that. Beatles second shits on this easily. Meet the Beatles shits on this easily.
Yeah, because they're compiling the best of the Beatles work.
Yeah, they're compiling the best of everything.
They already knew it was successful, so they're like, all right, these songs did great in the UK. Let's just put all the good songs together and make one incredible debut album for them over here. And that's what
American
happened.
Hard Day's Night would make you want to pull your teeth out.
Oh God.
I still stand by what I said. I do think a lot of I think, yeah, the Beatles albums from the 63, 64 are maybe a bit more consistent in terms of release. But like the two highs for me of this early era, Surfer Girl and All Summer Long, beat any early Beatles album for me.
I don't know if I agree with that, but to each his
I
own.
know I made
Hard
my
Day, for me,
year.
Hard Day's Night clears them both. But
Yeah, that and also like if we're looking at some of those US albums, man, I fucking love Beatles.
Well, yeah, but Meet the Beatles, holy shit, that's just like
the Beatles and also Beatles second. I can see why Christ God loves it so much. It's damn good. And the covers on there compare like Please Mr. Postman to Louie Louie. It's like
all right. Any closing thoughts or should we wrap it up?
I'm excited for what we talk about next with the albums because that's one of my favorites.
Yes, we are getting into a very good album with the next one. It'll be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to
it. Yeah, this one, Shutdown Volume 2, incredible album cover.
Yeah, it's a good cover for sure. Yeah, I like it. I think it's better than the cover that preceded it, Little Deuce Coupe. I think that's kind of
better than arguably any cover that preceded it except for the debut in Surfer Girl.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Oh, you mean cover like album cover?
Yeah.
No, it's a very good album cover. I mean,
what cover do you think I was talking about? Louie Louie?
Yeah, Matt's still stuck on Louie Louie.
Oh no, sorry, I was just checking something. But yeah, no, Louie Louie. I will say though, the highs on here are really good. It's just the lows are just, oh my God.
That's been the talk of the town tonight. All right.
So we will wrap it up there. So thank you everybody for listening to this 35th episode of Good Timin. I hope you all enjoyed the show. I had a great time discussing Shutdown Volume 2 with you guys, and I'm looking forward to covering more of the Beach Boys' early albums and recordings in the near future. So, as always, if you like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. And also, as a reminder, the Good Timin podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.